My name is Timothy Jewel Dunham II. I am the newly appointed assistant pastor right here at God's Throne. We are very, very, very excited to be hosting this event right here in the heart of the city. We're going to lay just a couple ground rules for tonight to make sure that things run smoothly, all right? Number one, the restrooms. There is a restroom just out here in the foyer if you do need to go to the restroom. There are also restrooms located downstairs. The gentleman's restroom will be just as you get to the bottom of the stairs. For the ladies, you will go just a little bit further over to the left, and the restrooms will be there. All right, very, very important that we keep the aisleways clear tonight. In terms of our mics, where you can come and speak, we have one set up here over to my right and one directly here in front of me. All right, very, very important tonight. We are here tonight for community awareness. All right, very, very important. Tonight is not about complaining. All right, we're here to develop community awareness. That's what tonight is all about. All right. Also, I will be introducing our moderator here in just a moment. But tonight, we do want to start tonight off with scripture and prayer. I'll be reading for you tonight Psalms 23. And it reads, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Amen. A few more announcements. Gentlemen, if you're in the room, please remove your hats. And I would be remiss if I did not say this. We are in the house of God. Okay? We are in a church. Please be respectful. You will have a limited amount of time on the topics that you bring up here as you come up to the mic. Please be respectful. And tonight, as we get started, if you would stand, I would like to open us up with the word of prayer. Gracious God, our Father, we thank you for your grace and your mercy. God, we thank you that we are in this place at this time. God, we thank you for what this means for this city of Stockton. And God, tonight we pray that our efforts tonight would bring forth fruit, oh God. God, we pray that the investments that we make into the conversations tonight would breathe new life into the areas of our city. God, we thank you for our officials who are here to represent our city. God, we thank you for our community who has come out tonight. God, we pray that tonight this be the start of something very special, God. That you would begin to move throughout this city like never before. God, that the crime rates would continue to drop. God, that our streets would begin to get cleaned up. And God, tonight, right now, oh God, we would ask that this meeting would be something that you would look down upon and smile upon, oh God. God, we thank you tonight, and we pray that tonight runs smoothly. God, that we get something out of tonight that will better our future for our children and our children's children, oh God. In the name of Jesus, we thank you and we praise you tonight. It's in Jesus' name we pray and ask this prayer. Amen. Amen. Without any further ado, I do want to go ahead and turn over the mic to our moderator, Miss Gloria Nomura.
Thank you. I also want to say welcome to all of you for being here tonight. And thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us to share your concerns and some of the issues that deal with the community and the Stockton Police Department. Again, our purpose tonight is to open the dialogue between the community and the Stockton Police Department. And in conducting this forum tonight, there are some things that I've asked you to keep in mind. Number one, as Pastor Dunn said, we are guests in the house of the Lord. So we are to conduct ourselves in a spirit of respect, cooperation, courtesy, and dignity. All of you have been given an agenda. I'd like you to look over the agenda so you know what we are going to be doing. After I speak, I'm going to turn the mic over to two of the Community Advisory Board members, Art and Bill. Then we will have our panel of 3 speakers, and then there will be a time for questions from the audience or comments from the audience, and then closing remarks from Pastor Dunham. Please keep in mind also that there are comment cards that you could have picked up as you entered into the church. You may write your questions down on that card, so when you come up to the mic, you have your question ready. Or if you choose not to participate as one of the speakers at the mic, feel free to write your question, comment, and leave it with the community board members so that we can address your concerns or your questions. Let's see. Okay, so the first part of our forum is presentations from 3 segments of our Stockton community. We have Chief Eric Jones, Stockton Police Department, President Bobby Bivens of Stockton NAACP chapter, and Executive Director Jose Rodriguez from El Concilio. And gentlemen, thank you for being here this evening. I would like to remind you that you only have 10 minutes for your presentation, and we will alert you when your time is up, like say 2 minutes and 1 minute. Also want to say that this is not the time for you to respond to a speaker. If one of the speakers is saying something you want to respond, this is not the time to do it. It's just a presentation from the speakers. And I'm also asking the audience that during the presentation by the speakers, there is not a time for questions or a response. It is strictly their presentation. At the end of the presentation, with the question and answer period, then you may ask a question of the speaker, of the police department, or the community advisory board. And again, thank you for being here. And our first presenter is Chief Jones of the Stockton Police Department.
Thank you, Gloria, and good evening, everybody. We're gonna have a little introduction actually by the Community Advisory Board members and talk a little bit about what the Community Advisory Board is about, and then I'll come back. So, Art, why don't you come up and do that with Bill.
Good evening, everybody, and I'm glad all of you here are present, and thank you for coming. The Community Advisory Board started with individuals like yourself, people who had feelings. Back in 2012, we all kind of remember that. It was a very dark period in our city, but many of us, many of you, actually went to a meeting, a town hall meeting, back in August of 2012. Chief Jones had a town hall meeting. He wanted to hear what the community had to say with regards to our safety, the crime that was kind of going out of control. We had a recession. We had cutbacks in budget for our city. With all of that in mind, we all went through a lot of emotions. I know I did. I feel what you feel today. We all did here. And many of us volunteered when Chief Jones asked who would like to volunteer for a community advisory board. Many stepped up to the plate. And from there, many of us began to represent our city. I have a direct communication on a monthly basis with Chief Jones and many other police officers in the department. With that, Many of our CAB members were either drafted, they volunteered, or recommended. And through the process, we give constructive feedback what we hear in the community. Many of us participate at community meetings as well. A neighborhood watch program, a special meeting that's organized by a council member or other members within our city throughout the community. And we listen, we hear what you say, and those are conveyed directly to Chief Jones. Many of those are constructive. We're very honest and sincere what we hear, and we tell them exactly how we hear it. But then we're also proactive. Proactive that how we can find solutions to the comments that we hear. And then we have forums. This is one of them. This is a result of conversations that we've had in the past, and as time went by, we said we need to have a community meeting or a forum where we could hear what the community has to say. So this is a result of many of you that we also look forward to seeing and speaking to many of you down the road and tonight. And with that, this is what a CAB is all about. And with that, I'd like to pass it on to Bill.
Thank you, Art. The mission of the Community Advisory Board is to increase the level of communication through all areas within the city. And hopefully, by increasing the levels of communication, we can then build bridges of trust such that the community of Stockton becomes stronger and also becomes safer. As Art indicated, the Community Advisory Board is made up of members of the community, and we represent a wide diversity of the community. I happen to represent the business community. The members are Gregory Barr, Pastor Jerry Cook, Pastor Timothy Dunham, Art Gomez, Urban Jefferson, Kathy Kimry, Lynn King, Ruth McMaster, Becky Moffett, Minister Tommy Mohammed, Gloria Nomura, Felicia Estrada, Barbara Zabrago, Fred Shield, Kanitha Stevens, Bill Stormer, Mike Vang, and Michael Vaughn, Tony Washington, and the Reverend Ernest Williams. Again, at the conclusion, if you have a question or a comment, you can approach any one of the CAB members. We have comment cards for you. Chief?
Let me do this again. I'm sorry, I forgot the guys. But anyway, again, let's welcome Chief Eric Jones from Stockton Police Department.
Thank you, Gloria. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. Let's go over first what the purpose of tonight's meeting is. It's simply to open up a dialogue, which we're going to have tonight, about police-community relations, how we can improve them, and how we're going to move forward. It really comes down to trust. And trust is a mutual thing that insists upon the building of relationships between the police department and who do we serve, the community. And really it comes down to understanding a few things, but two narratives, if you will. The first one is us as a police department acknowledging that we have a lot of work to do to increase police-community relations, especially in our neighborhoods of color or where the high risk is. And these are areas where we have the highest need for our police to often be, and is often the area where there's often the least amount of trust between the community and the criminal justice system in general, but most often specifically first-line law enforcement. Also though, and this is something that I think has been missing from some of the dialogue across the country, across the state, is the police perspective and the police narrative as to what the challenges of law enforcement is all about. Until we can discuss both sides, these two narratives, we will have barriers between them. And I'll tell you about the discussions we're having within our own department, the staff, the difficult discussions we talk about, racial reconciliation, race relations, historical perspectives. These are topics we're talking about in our police department. I want to thank the Community Advisory Board. They drove this meeting tonight, and this is dialogue that can be sometimes challenging, sometimes difficult to have. It's a necessity. It's necessary for us to have this dialogue. I want to acknowledge we have some members from the Sheriff's Office as well as the District Attorney's Office here. I want to thank them for being here tonight. And I want to dive into the two narratives. I mentioned these two narratives that often can result from the exact same incident. You can often have more than two narratives, but let me just give you one example of what I'm talking about. One incident. Let's say somebody, for whatever reason, calls the police, and the police department responds. You all know, in law enforcement, in a very difficult, challenging career industry, we're often showing up for something that is of a negative nature. We're usually not called over to help celebrate an event or do something positive. It's just the nature of police work. And when police show up, let's assume somebody is arrested and taken to jail. You're automatically, typically, going to have two narratives right from the beginning. To the person who called the police and the person who we helped is probably going to look to the police department as the problem solvers. We went there and we helped them with that situation. The person who perhaps was arrested will sometimes or often view the police as the problem, maybe even as bullies, governmental suppression. Somebody who perhaps watched the arrest, not knowing anything about the original incident, may also have that same narrative or that same perspective. We need to acknowledge that there are different perspectives, different narratives going on, and until we do that, it's going to be difficult for us to continue this dialogue that has to happen. A famous commentator once said this about police. The police officer must be a minister, a social worker, a diplomat, a tough guy, and a gentleman, sometimes all at once. Now let's start from my perspective of acknowledging the work that the police department has to do. We at Stockton PD acknowledge we need to increase trust within the communities that we serve. We acknowledge that there is a historical perspective that often shapes the feelings of injustice across the community, within our community, across the state, and across the nation. We acknowledge that. And it comes down to moving forward through 5 key areas: trust, accountability, oversight, transparency, and training. And I'll talk about each of those as to what we are doing at the police department. Stockton PD is part of what is known as the National Network for Safe Communities. I want to just give one quote of our work with the U.S. Department of Justice, but this is a quote from the Department of Justice, of which I agree. If we tackle this issue of racial reconciliation, informed by evidence and research, supported by community partners, and performed with courage, then we will be moving into a new era of policing. Now, as Urban Jefferson has said, part of our community advisory board, we have to be willing to have the courageous conversation, especially when it comes to race relations, racial reconciliation, and the communities that we serve as a police department. For law enforcement, I mentioned there's the historical context that we have to be aware of. There are specific incidents that have occurred in law enforcement that we have to acknowledge and be aware of. And we have to understand that these things often lead into a deep-seated mistrust of the police within our communities. We understand that. We face that. We also need to understand legal segregation and even governmental oppression, where the police were used to enforce some legal segregation laws, was not that long ago. We understand that and we recognize that. We also understand, Stockton PD, we can no longer do blanket zero-tolerance enforcement. It puts another divider between the police and the community. This is why we are doing things like ceasefire, which is a very strategic enforcement model that understands that the community needs the police support in these hardest-hit communities. We do not subscribe to what some other agencies have done across the nation as stop and frisk. We understand that's not the way you build relationships with the very community you serve. We also need to consider the various hats that the law enforcement has to wear. One recent video clip, very unfortunate in Phoenix, or in the Arizona area, where a police officer was killed. It captured what that officer was going through. Being courteous and polite with the contact of a person, and then suddenly he was killed because the person pulled out a pistol. It just shows the difficulties of law enforcement. We need to understand that the officers have their officer safety tactics and also have to be cordial and polite and professionals, and that's my expectation. But also, I want to talk about the expectations of the community during a police contact, and that is being cooperative and compliant. If the public was always compliant and cooperative, officers would never have to use force. And most of the time, we have 1,000 calls for service per day. Most of the time, it goes fine. But not everybody's going to be compliant. Sometimes the person's going to resist, and sometimes force needs to be used. We need to recognize that. What we're doing with the police department on training, accountability, and oversight. We do recognize that when we have an officer-involved shooting, for example, we have what's known as a countywide protocol. An external review by the district attorney's office taking lead, multiple agencies, so it's not just us doing our own investigation, to take a look at those shootings. We have an internal affairs unit, which does oversight and maintains the credibility of the police department. We're going to body cameras because we want to be transparent about what we do. We are moving forward, and we do recognize we have a long way to go to continue to bind police-community relations together, and we are doing things to increase our accountability and increase our trust. But we do need to talk about also how are we going to reduce crime in Stockton. Police-community relations and reducing crime go together. We need to all work together on how we're going to reduce crime, especially in our hard-hit neighborhoods. And we need to all concentrate on how we're going to work on improving those police-community relations together. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Now I'd like to have Bobby Bivens, President of the Stockton NAACP. Let's give a hand to President Bobby Bivens.
Good evening. I'd like to say thank you to all of you for being out here, because this is an important day and an important time. And the NAACP has been visibly working with the issues of police and community for a number of years. It didn't just start this year, last year, or a few years ago on a local and national basis. We here in Stockton have been working with the police. We have worked to try to increase the number of black officers on the force. We have brought suggestions to the chief, of which he has followed some. We encourage them to leave the community and go out where they can be among African Americans and have the opportunity to recruit African American officers. And I have to say that this past summer, the Stockton PD did go to the National Association of Young Colored People's National Convention to recruit or attempt to recruit black officers. Now that's a step. It's not a satisfying step, but it's a step. It's one that's never been made before. A lot of people believe that the officers need to be homegrown. They do need to be homegrown. And the police need to be in the schools visiting with third graders instead of having statisticians collecting numbers at the third grade to build jail cells. Chief Jones has brought about a different culture, but there are officers in the force that have cultural practices that have no place in Stockton. There are still people on the force that believe that people of color are to be stepped on rather than served. As you look back in history, policing came into practice for the purpose of rounding up slaves. the slave masters and plantation owners sent out riders with guns and whips to capture runaway slaves. We are not runaway slaves, and this is not slavery time, and we don't need to be captured, suppressed, or oppressed. The attitude of Chief Jones is very positive. The attitude of some of the higher ranking officers is very positive. And I will go as far as to say that many of the officers on the force are caring, loving people, and everybody wants to go home at night. But because you want to go home at night does not mean that somebody else has to die.
Come on now. Amen. Yes.
We have had many incidents in Stockton, and the chief and I have talked quickly when some of those incidents have happened. And he has tried to be transparent, and he has sought out solutions, and not just meeting with the NAACP, but with other African Americans throughout the community, including his advisory committee. The reinstitution of the group of ministers and community people that have gone to Kenfield and to Sierra Vista and other parts of the community in an effort to reduce crime, and in fact, in reducing crime, is a plus under his watch. It was here before, it should have never left, but it's back, and the work of these people have made a difference in our community. But it's still not enough, because the community has to step up as well. There's a two-sided street here. You know, once in my life I thought I wanted to be a police officer. I took the test, and I knew some of my friends would get busted if I was a cop, and I said, I can't do that. Well, that was my choice. On the other hand, my brother did, went to work for the LA Sheriff's Department, lasted 4 days, because in jail somebody wanted him to beat up somebody in jail, and he quit. So there are bad people and there are good people. As we talk about the task, the NAACP is looking for a national set of guidelines that all police units will use across the nation and standards, so that what happens in Stockton will happen in Lodi, will happen in LA, will happen in Atlanta, will happen in Tallahassee, all over the country. But the rules have to be changed. When 9/11 happened in America, police changed, policing changed. We went from protect and serve to a terror suppression mode of training and mentality. That has been long gone, but the mentality has lingered in the training manuals of some of the police departments. I have spoken to Chief Jones about this, and he is looking at other ways, and they are modifying the training. But that doesn't mean that today those folks that oppress people in the community have been washed out. The training needs to be culturally sensitive. The police department's training is doing better, but it needs to be culturally sensitive. They need to understand how black folk operate. They need to understand how black people think. They need to understand that maybe a person that is not speaking clearly is not a threat, or is not somebody that's on drugs, but perhaps they may have a speech impediment. I witnessed a program at the school district last week where 3 Latino kids showed a project, and I listened to them. And I know that if they were not having a science project with robots in their hands, the teachers would be trying to put them into a EMR class, or a class for students that are mentally challenged, because their ability to deliver their language was not clear. But what they were doing was crystal clear and was brilliant. We have that going on in the black community in Stockton. We have brilliant children that may not be able to articulate what it is that they want to say out of fear. Many, many black people are afraid of the police. Many, many Latinos are afraid of the police. So we have to get beyond the fear part of policing and being afraid to deal with the police officers and be able to talk to them. And if you are accosted, you need to collect the information necessary to get them dealt with through the police department. Policy needs to be established as we move into putting cameras on police officers. And the policy should be that after a 90-day or 60-day period of training, if an officer fails to turn on his camera, he should automatically be terminated. That's a policy that needs to be established to make sure that we have good policing practices. In respect of how people in the community are treated, relationships need to be built. Officers need to get out the car. They need to walk in the neighborhood. They need to talk with people. They need to know who the people are. There needs to be, as the chief said, a trust built between police officers and community people all over the community. And the Gestapo tactics of talking bad to youngsters because they may be wearing their pants down low in a mode that I see white kids doing all over America as I travel now. It's not just black kids, it's not Latinos, it's Asian, it's all the kids. It's a sick, sad way to dress, but nevertheless, that should not determine how you decide to deal with a young person. A young person needs to be talked to, and they need to have an opportunity to explain what it is that they want to say. And if they're too afraid to talk about it at the moment, they need to be given a moment instead of challenged and bullied. So we don't need any police bullying. That has been a part of the practice. That has been a part of what has caused conflict in the community nationwide. We too, on the other side of the fence, don't need to be disrespectful of police officers. I grew up understanding that if a man has a baton in his hand and he has a gun under his hip, you better respect those two things and don't be no fool, because you can't win. There is no way to win when somebody has a weapon on them and you're being disrespectful. So respect is a greater part of it. We have work to do on both sides. The NAACP is here to address the issues, to speak up for people that can't speak for themselves, to negotiate, to mediate, and when necessary, to litigate. So I will stop there and address issues from there on. Thank you very much.
And now I'll have Jose Rodriguez, Executive Director of El Concilio. Jose.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation to be here today by the police chief and the Citizens Advisory Board. I'm in a very difficult position because I have to follow Bobby Bivens, and I'm the last person who's going to speak before we start the citizen comments, and I think that's what we're all here about. Why we're all here today, because we want to hear what the community has to say. But I do want to take a few minutes of my time to talk a little bit about the relationship between the Latino community and the Stockton Police Department. And I have to say that I'm very optimistic about the future of the relationship between the Latino community and the Stockton Police Department. Not only because Chief Jones is a person who is dedicated to reaching out and is always willing to listen, but I can tell you that he is working with the community to establish programs like we have established at the Concilio to encourage the community not to be afraid of the police and to call them, regardless of their immigration status. The police are here to serve, and that's what we have to do, is educate the community. I'm optimistic about police relations because we also have a new district attorney and a sheriff. And Tori Berber Salazar is here. Thank you, Tori, for being here. And I saw Sheriff Moore. Thank you very much for being here. And I think that that's what gives me optimism, is the fact that in our community, we can bring all those individuals together in one forum and have them hear what the community has to say. What the community has to say sometimes isn't nice, sometimes it isn't pleasant, and as Bobby said, you know, we have a certain fear or animosity of the police department, but the only way we're going to be able to break down those barriers is by having dialogue and creating more education in the community. For example, in the Latino community, I was sharing with Chief Jones recently that we were hearing that many young men were being stopped because they had their windows tinted. Okay, and they had their windows tinted incorrectly. Their windows, they had tinted the driver's side of the window, but it wasn't their fault. Many of them did not know the law, and when they went to the tint shops to get their windows tinted, they would go up to the owner of the tint shop and say, "I want the legal tint." They would tint the whole car, not telling this person that that isn't legal. The person would go out and drive, and then get pulled over by the police department. When I brought that issue to the chief, he said, we need to do something about that. Maybe we need to educate the community about what the law says regarding the tinting of windows. Because we certainly don't want people to think that that's the way we enforce the law. So that's what gives me optimism, is the fact that he's willing to work on educating the community. But as Bobby said, the community also has to come forward. It is very affirming to see so many people here today to have this dialogue, and that's what we need to do. But beyond the people who are here today, we also need to reach out to the greater community, because we know that there's a lot more people who could have been here today who are not here. And those are the people that we need to reach. I'm also optimistic about the community police relations because of the effort, as Bobby mentioned, by the police chief to hire more police officers who look like the community that they are policing. It's a great step that they went to the NAACP National Convention to recruit more African American officers, but we really need to develop programs and ideas where we can develop homegrown our own officers here. And I've heard some of these ideas in some of the different forums. Just like we have a healthcare careers academy that is growing medical professionals, we also need to establish a law enforcement academy that's going to take young people from this community and guide them to the career of law enforcement. And then what also gives me optimism is these forums. This is the third or fourth forum that I've attended, and we need to have more of these forums. And the good thing is that the sheriff, the police chief, the sheriff, the district attorney, they're all on board, they all recognize that reaching out to the community and having these type of forums and having the dialogue is what we really need to do, to break down some of these barriers. Are things perfect? No. Is there a lot of work to do? Yes. But the only way we're going to be able to do that work is by having these type of forums, having the dialogue, and be willing to put some of these tough issues on the table. And so that's why I'm here, looking forward to hearing what the community has to say, and letting you know that we at NCLC remain committed to being the advocates for the Latino community. We've been around for the last 47 years, creating programs that improve the quality of life for the Latino community, the Spanish-speaking community. But some of the programs that we're most proud of is like the Lianis program, like I mentioned earlier, programs that are helping break down barriers between the community and the police department. Because we really know that the police are here to serve the community. So with that, I just want to thank you for being here, and I'm really interested in hearing what the community has to say. Thank you.
Okay, let's give another round of applause for our three speakers. Thank you very much. Now we are at the portion of our evening's presentation for questions and answers. So if you have any questions that you would like to address to each one of these speakers, please form a line. There are 2 microphones here. Don't be shy. Now's the opportunity to ask the question or to even make a comment in regard to what was spoken by one of the speakers. And again, I'm asking you that you will only have 2 minutes, and when you ask your question and it is answered, you cannot ask another question, okay? And please make sure you address the speaker that you would like to have your question directed. And I'll give you a couple more minutes to think about it. I know it takes a little while for some of us to do this. But anyway, again, if you would like to ask a question or make a comment, please form a line at one of the microphones. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. My name is James Leon. I live in City 332 North Port City. I said what I said. I feel extraordinary. How you feel extraordinary. Thank you. I praise you so much. Did you keep my heart, my friend? Keep my power, yeah. Daddy, save that you. Goodbye. Welcome.
Just to recap real quickly, James feels good. He praises what they do. And he also feels that he could probably participate more in volunteering.
Thank you, Mark. Have a good weekend.
Thank you much. Have a good evening.
James?
Good evening. Thank you all for giving us this opportunity to speak to you in the House of the Lord. I would like to say thank you, first of all, to Chief Jones, because I know that living in the southeast side of Stockton, the gunshots and the crimes have dropped. They're still there. It's never going to go away completely. Not your fault. It's the community, you know. But I would strongly suggest that you continue to build the relationships with the school districts. As we mentioned before, the statistics say that third grade and on, you're already expected for prison. Then get into the schools and make an extra effort because our kids are growing up with the generation and the belief that the cops are against us. So it's hard for people like us who don't see you as against us, but at the same time I can tell you that when I see a cop car, I get scared. And it's not that I have anything to hide or I'm doing anything wrong, it's just the perception of when we're gonna get pulled over, we're already like that. That image is bad. But I want to thank you for that. And the Latino community, we want jobs. We need jobs. And volunteering, even if it's volunteering, I know that there are some youth who don't want to live that life, but they're forced in that lifestyle. They're forced to carry weapons because of their threats in that lifestyle that they had. They don't want that. And if you take the time to sit out there and say, why are you doing this? And let me help you get a job, they'll more than likely want to work with you. So bottom line is we need jobs. Our babies need to know that you're going to be there in the schools. Don't come in a uniform all the time. Come in as just regular clothes and let them know you're human just like us. So thank you.
We didn't really discuss too much about the root causes of crime and, you know, how we have to try to get ahead of the next generations of crime that are affecting our community. It's critical. We should be on parallel tracks with doing our intervention right now on the violence that's occurring out on the street, but also considering the next possible generations of wave of crime, and that's with youth. It's very important. And we all know, or many of us do, the root causes of crime are often poverty, education, and jobs. And so those are three things we struggle with in this community that we all agree. We've spoken about it. It's something that we have to really work on in our community. And I agree, we need police officers' presence in the schools. They need to see us as police officers as human. We're human just like you, but when we put on the law enforcement uniform, we're out there doing public safety. But it is important for us to work with our youth because that's the future of our community.
To our panel and everybody here, I'd like to really say appreciation that everybody here in the community has come out, and this obviously is very important. Chief Jones, if you could share with us perhaps any ideas you might have for anything that's innovative. I think people here are kind of asking what could change or what could be possibly new that you'd offer for that bridging in the communities. Suggestion, maybe being in school without uniforms on, being more present, being on foot, as Mr. Bivens said, in neighborhoods, so that people just have a closer relationship. So perhaps you could share any ideas?
Yes, we put together, we've got a 3-year strategic plan, and part of that is getting back to basic community policing. And so I'll tell you about some innovative strategies I think we're headed toward, the work we have to do, but some of the best things are really not reinventing the wheel, but going back to what works. We've heard community policing or foot patrols. You know, when it comes down to it, community policing, the definition, there's been books written about it, volumes of books, entire courses taught on it. It comes down to the police officer having the time and will to get out of the patrol car and talk to the community with positive interactions and get to know the community and be responsible for a smaller geographic area, getting out, talking to the shop owners, getting out of the car, talking to the kids in the park. And that's how you develop relationships, that's how you fight crime, because that's how you find out what's going on in the neighborhoods. Some other things we're working on is we just completed actually the first wave of an entire year of training, and this is called Procedural Justice Police Legitimacy Training. This is training that goes beyond just customer service training. It goes beyond just even cultural sensitivity training. It is about the need for the police to be viewed as legitimate within the very community that they serve, because if they're not viewed as legitimate, we have more than an uphill battle. This is training that came out of Chicago. We worked with Oakland and Salinas on rolling it out here in Stockton. It gets into very difficult conversations, or those courageous conversations among our staff and with community members on race relations, racial reconciliation, the historical perspective we spoke about. It just comes down to this, reminding officers why they signed up to do the work we do, and giving the community a voice and being fair and just in what we do. And we just completed the entire department. We understand it's more than just training. How do you then implement that? How are you using the training in the field? How are the officers actually applying it? And how are we at the police department evaluating and ensuring that the officers are putting that training to good use out in the field? And we're doing that. We're working with several educational partners. We're working with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the State Attorney General's Office on institutionalizing these values for policing in our community. And those are just a couple examples of training, putting it into practice. What are our plans to get back into community policing? And we're working on a number of things. Thank you.
One of the additional things that the police officers some officers no longer have is consequential fear. And there has to be an element of consequential fear, because we all have consequential fear. And if we do A, then we know that B is going to happen. And unfortunately, some of the bargaining agreements and things that have bureaucracy's hands tied need to be adjusted and addressed. Because if there is no consequential fear, then those officers that are rogue officers will continue to do what they have to do, or do what they do, not have to do.
I was just going to comment that, regarding innovative ideas and suggestions from the community, I know that it's been suggested to the police chief and he's acting on it, is to allow nonprofits to come into the roll call in the morning before the officers go out, to allow us to share with them what it is that we do as agencies. For example, we have mental health services, we have other services that police officers may be able to pass on to the community when they're responding to calls. If they respond to a call and they see that someone could use the services that a particular agency provides, they will then be able to make that referral. But they can't make that referral if they don't know what these agencies provide. And that's a simple program, education, that can be done with the police officers that it's not going to cost any money and is really going to make the community that much stronger, knowing that the nonprofits and the police force are working together.
Good evening, my name is Cecil Wright, and to continue to chief along the area of training, most teachers and most professionals who are certified are required to take a certain amount of training every year to maintain that certification. And I was wondering, does the Stockton Police Department have such a program? And second, along that same line of training, how many of your peer officers are used as trainers in some of these in some of this training that goes on? Because I believe that if you have someone who looks like you from a standpoint of an officer who's doing the training, it's more effective than an outside educator coming in and basically doing that. Thank you.
Sure, thanks for the question. To begin with, we do have annual training, legal mandates. It's called advanced officer training. We follow POST guidelines, which are the Peace Officer Standards and Training Guidelines, a certain amount of hours every year that the police officers have to apply. We go, especially with this procedural justice and police legitimacy training, that's above and beyond just what is mandated or required of our staff. That's something that my command staff and I felt we needed, so we added that training. And the way we did it is this was Chicago, training developed in Chicago with Yale University, reality-based though with what's really going on in the community. So you've got community involved in that as well as your educational institutions. And we knew not everything is cookie cutter. You have to apply it for your community, which we did. And we sent our trainers, we sent our staff, some supervisors and officers to Chicago, went through their entire training, and they brought it with them back to Stockton, and then we've even had the Chicago trainers come out and watch how we're doing it. We're learning from each other. I mean, that's what we do in our law enforcement industry, is always scan for best practices, what's working out there. Do we need to be flexible and change the way we're doing business? And that's an example of where we did, in fact, train our own trainers within our department.
Good evening, and good evening. There we go. Jose, good to see you. Bobby, Chief Jones, and Gloria. All of you, it's good to see you here, but look around, we don't have enough of us in this place. We need to be filled up there. The foyer need to be filled up. We need to reach the community. They need to be aware of what's going on around not only Stockton, but around this country. Not only with the fear of people having with police officers, I myself also wanted to become a police officer. I just couldn't make it. But anyway, just a couple of weeks ago, I was violated. I walked to my house, not 10 minutes later, my car got shot up by 6 guys shooting back and forth at each other. Community, we need to get involved. I started calling all of my friends around my neighborhood that I knew that we established a neighborhood watch to see if they were okay. Police response was good. They were right there. But it's our children, it's our neighbors. They're shooting back and forth at one another. We need to come together and police. Hello? We need to stop this, nip it quickly. We know if our neighbors are not doing right, then we need to get to these kids are not going to school. We need to find out where they're going because they're watching us go to work and they're going inside of our houses. We need change. And the change has to start now, and it has to start with me. It has to start with you. I have more to say, but we need more open forums. Thank you.
Hi everybody. My concern is I'm a community from Macon, Georgia, but I moved to Stockton, California. And my concern is the mental disability. My son was, I feel like sometimes the police can be the problem, taking people's lives in the community. My disabled son, James, was beat up. And I'm his mother, Teresa, single mother. You know, it's a lot of single parents. But my son was beat up. The Stockton Police Department, I feel like, I shake my head. It's sad. My boy is 18, but his IQ is over 10 to 5-year-old. And he was beat up by the Stockton Police Department dog. They let the dog out the car. And the thing is that my neighbor Katrina Walker got beat up. But my son was like violated. He was in handcuffs. And they watched my boy and they on the ground like a circus. I was at church feeding the homeless November the 23rd, 2014. What about the disabled victims? The disabled people? What about the community of the innocent bystanders that haven't committed a crime but have been shot down and killed by some of the Stockton, not all of them, evil. But to me, a lot of bloodshed have been shed in Stockton, California communities. What about a change in some of the police officers that are on the force that got trying to take their power overhead and try to get in the communities, working with the disabled people, America with Disabilities Act. My son was an innocent bystander, but and he was beat up. But I just want to know the reason why, and I want to know when the change is coming with the disabled, because a lot of stuff, wrong stuff, been committed with people with disabilities.
Good evening, my name is Alejandra Gutierrez. I'm a community and youth organizer at Fathers and Families of San Joaquin, and I too wanted to thank the panelists and Chief Jones for holding this forum. And I heard a lot of optimism, in the panel, which I think is always a great approach. But it is also important to be able to have very critical conversations about the realities. And my sister's story here is just a perfect example of what is really going on every single day. Mm-hmm. So prayers to you and your family. So these forums definitely, I believe, is the approach to building a better relationship with police and community. And like my brother said earlier, we need to really have a better outreach strategy to fill up the room, but really making sure that we are being intentional about reaching out to the youth and the families that are hardest hit with these issues. And we're talking about fear, and we have to reach those families that have that fear in order to break down that wall. So I think that partnering with the community organizations that work alongside these families every single day really is the key. I'm connected to a community organization, and I'll be honest, I just found out about this today, and it might be my fault for not taking the initiative, but I mean, I'm connected, and I just found out today, so I could just imagine families that have no broader network here in this local community. And it's also important to really talk about ways to partner up with the formerly incarcerated, because they are the ones that are oftentimes just continually getting arrested, and We have to work together to end that cycle. So my question, Chief Jones, is what are the plans to continue partnering up with community organizations and other systems like probation that highly impact the lives of these individuals, and how can we continue to partner up? Are there any plans set up for the near future to do that, and to at least partner up to bring those individuals to listen and to be able to also uplift their voice?
Yes, we recognize, I think in law enforcement, we've learned, we continue to learn, and we know that we have to work, obviously with the very community that we police, but we also have to recognize that we have to utilize services and our nonprofits to ensure, especially those who have been formerly incarcerated, to give them the tools they need to succeed. Because we don't want to use arrests as our only solution. There are more tools to our tool belt than just the handcuffs. And I'll give you one example, well two. One is we work with the Community Corrections Partnership, which is all of the agencies, part of the criminal justice system, from judges to the district attorney's office, sheriff's office, probation, on dealing with mass incarceration is not what works to reduce crime. And we recognize that. Secondly, for violence in particular, our violence reduction strategy primarily is currently ceasefire. We realize it's a very small percentage of our community that is creating a very large proportion of repetitive violent crime. It's identifying them very strategically, data-driven, and then using our community partners to help us. We use PACT, people in congregations together, are out doing night walks, partnering with us in the right areas. We also work with the nonprofits to give a lot of these typically young men a different avenue to take, or at least give them the tools so that we, one thing we have in common with our community partners is we don't want them dead, we don't want them incarcerated, we want them on a different path, and that's where we need help from the community partners, the nonprofits, and that is, quite frankly, a new way of doing business for us. And we're still rolling out ceasefire. It's very important to us, but we think that is the answer to eventually affecting our cycle of violence. And those are two examples.
Again, if you want to speak, please stand in line so we have an idea of how many people. So again, if you have a question or a comment, please form a line at this microphone or that microphone so we have an idea of who is speaking. It's a time thing. Want to make sure that everybody has enough time. Thank you.
The lady asked a question to the chief related to the disabled or people with disabilities. And I think that one of the things that should be looked at, Chief, is the identification of people that have problems rather than people necessarily being drug addicted. And I think that there needs to be some enhanced training for the police and further knowledge to identify those types of behaviors, and then particularly in people of color when the officer may not understand where they're coming from or how they're coming in the first place. So I would suggest that in response to you, in response to the question that was asked by the lady related to the disability.
Yes, and we recognize that mental disability is an issue for our community, and this is a big issue for all of us within the criminal justice system, but it's also a larger social issue. Many times, and we all understand that police officers are not clinicians, they're not able to make a lot of those calls, they're not psychologists, and oftentimes when they're called to a scene, they have the information available to them to what's going on right there. We're working with county mental health services. Actually, we had a countywide criminal justice task force meeting just a couple months ago. And it involved your elected officials at the city and county level, as well as all of the criminal justice experts and heads, many of them who are here in this room. And we identified collectively as a group that mental health issues is a primary focal point for our community to be able to have the community come together, as well as county mental health and other services, to ensure that everyone is getting help or the help they need before, for example, law enforcement has to be called.
First, giving honor to God and Reverend Dunham, Chief Eric James Jones, I just want to ask, when a police officer engages in one of these so-called rolling shootouts, are the bullets that are fired by officers any less dangerous to the surrounding public than those fired by the criminal suspects?
So, to answer your question, certainly all bullets have the same deadly potential.
Hi, my name is Deion Smith Down. I'm the mother of James Rivera, who was murdered in Stockton, July 22nd, 2010. He was assassinated inside of a garage. Y'all opened fire on him, shot him 48 times, 18 into his body. And I'm, as a mother, been fighting almost 5 years in Stockton, and I still have no closure. This is what I have to look at as a mother. This is what I have to travel to Ferguson, Oakland, everywhere to get some kind of support, to come back to Stockton to let y'all know that we're not going to accept this. We're not going to accept that y'all turn y'all head. All you people in here, you DAs, you know, we go to the DA office, all you polices, all you sheriff, you know, y'all turn y'all head. I'm a mother that's a crime for justice. You know, you've been killing ever since before James, 2009. The president is still killing. James Rivera, Luther Brown, James Cook, Johnny Hayes, many more names. It got to stop. And then your officers get a 3-day vacation pay. And then we don't know if they're being drug tested, psychic tests. Can you explain that? How long do it take for them to return? And then they still using these same calls. Justify. Justify what?
No justice, no peace.
No justice, no peace.
Okay, that's enough, please. We'll not have enough time for questions. So please, the next person, sir.
Using your guns in our community, AR-15s.
Lady, yellow, please sit down. Thank you.
Thank you,
How you doing? I got a question for the chief. I'm an online activist and I do a lot of online work and stuff. And I have been seeing a lot of police brutality videos come online that has your officers attacking people from the communities and just like for like the pettiest things, you know what I mean? Like also for like constitutional things, like saying like fuck you to an officer, excuse me, can you have some level of that to an officer?
Hello, I will shut this down.
That's what I say, excuse me. I'm sorry about that, I apologize. But saying stuff like that to officers, then the officer will like brutally just come up and start harassing him, and I thought that we had like constitutional freedom of speech. And I was wondering, since you've been saying that you and your officers have been talking amongst each other about the community and stuff that people know the community, how serious that's been taken and like what are the steps around that?
Misconduct by police officers is considered very serious. That's why I have an internal affairs professional standards section. We investigate that and we discipline officers if and when that happens. We have a specific system for that. Do we investigate videos? Absolutely. Whether or not somebody makes a complaint, if we're made aware of what appears to be misconduct, it's investigated and the officers are held accountable, and the the Attorney General can take a look at our internal affairs work and see to ensure that we are being investigative so that we're holding personnel accountable.
The question was raised, and the mother raised the question to Mrs. Rivera about her son. There's a bill being introduced to Congress that would mandate, and this is information for the public, that by Congressman Johnson from Georgia that will require anytime there's a police homicide that a outside independent prosecutor would be brought in. I believe and the NACP believes that when there is a homicide, there should be an independent prosecutor to take pressure off the local prosecutors and also to bring about a feeling of fairness and justice for the community. So we are, and I'm going to be meeting with the new DA. We have a new DA, and I honestly in my heart believe we have a new day. But we are going to be talking about the possibility of any time there's a police homicide to bring in an independent investigator, an independent prosecutor to allow the task that needs to be done so that the district attorney's office is not necessarily compromised as the fear was in New York.
Excuse me, if you have a question or comment, please come to the mic. Otherwise, next speaker, please.
Chief Eric Jones, I just want to ask, do you feel there are expectations to the law where your officers are concerned, yes or no?
Repeat the last part, please, miss.
Where your officers are concerned. Do you feel there are expectations to the law where your officers are concerned?
If I have this right, my expectations are that my police officers will follow the law as well as all of my policies and procedures.
My name is Phil Fernandez. First of all, I'm a business owner. So I know about loss, I know about crime. I know that you guys, the majority of you guys are good standing, you know. But I'm sitting here and I'm here with family. And I'm thinking about what Mr. Bivens said. And what he said was just because someone wants to go home doesn't mean someone has to be killed. About a month ago, my brother-in-law was picked up by the sheriffs, taken in for a psych test. You know, he had his issues. 16 days ago, on Howard Street, he was shot 6 times in the chest. And as he lay deceased, your officers came up and tased him. When did it become procedure to use lethal force before less than lethal force? I thought it was that we tase him first, and if that does not stop him, then we shoot him. 6 rounds to the chest, because I seen the body before it was prepared in the mortuary. I had to take pictures, because we plan on coming after you guys. 6 rounds with a .40 caliber. That's a lot of stopping power. You should have seen the holes in him. Why was he tased afterwards? Why wasn't he tased before? I'm not condoning anything he said. Like I said, I'm a business owner. He should be with Sheriff Moore over there in French Camp Jail, facing possible life. But in jail, we put him in the ground Friday. Numerous times we have tried to communicate with your department, with you. The first time I ever got to talk to anybody, you see me talking to Mr. Silva outside, Joseph Silva. The first time anyone's ever answered any of my questions. When is that communication going to be available to us, the family members? You know? That's it. That's all I have to say on it.
So there was a question, so if I may, I cannot discuss the detail of the case, but I will ensure that somebody from the department contacts you to at least answer the questions that we can answer. So I ask that you leave your information with us.
I can give you one of my business cards right now.
We'll do it after. Okay.
Hi, I have a question for Chief Eric Jones. Without explaining, would you please tell us just in a fashion if shooting from a moving vehicle in the state of California against the law?
For whom? It depends on the situation.
Wow.
the officers.
No, I understand.
Okay.
Sometimes the police officers may, if it's in defense of their life or others. That's the basic generic question or answer on that.
Thank you.
Okay, first I want to take the opportunity to thank Eric Jones, the Chief of Police, for the wonderful services that I have encountered with the police department. I personally had an issue and it was very delicate. It was a very scary situation and your police officers responded, made sure my family was safe, and to this day they see us in the community, and I have an 18-year-old and a 15-year-old and they talk about their cars to them, and so that to me is a bridge. It shows my boys that police officers are friends and they're interested in them. That's the first thing I wanted to say to you. The second is I work in mental health services, and I do hear a lot of unfortunate stories with our families, and we do our best to educate the families on how to deal with certain situations, and we have a lot of programs set through county mental health to educate the family members on mental illnesses. But my question to you is, what do we is there anything in place to work with the families that suffer from mental illnesses, like procedures? What do they do if they're in the street or their family members are having an episode? What should the families do when they contact 911 or they have police, they need police assistance? Should they be stating that offhand, or what can the families do to prevent further issues?
Certainly, if the police have to be called, we're looking for any and all information that the officers can have. Consider, though, or recognize that the officers still have to be faced with whatever the situation is. Again, they're not clinicians, but any information that can be provided to the dispatchers, to the officers, of perhaps mental state of the person is critical, is very important. But also, that answers the one question, and then kind of reiterating what we've discussed before, it's very, very important that we're getting them the help they need before police have to be called. But also, County Mental Health has some mobile crisis units that have been developed. So recognizing that there has to be the deployment of mental health personnel in the field day or night sometimes. And I think that will be beneficial and probably could be or should be expanded in the future as well.
Hi, I'm a mother with a question to you, especially you. My question is being, if you guys claim that you're human beings just like us, and you guys have families just like us, you have children just like us, if your child was shot in the back, where's the accountability for the officer that shot him in the back that said he was a threat, or he or she was the threat? Where's the accountability for the fact that that person was shot in the back? And there's no accountability. Why don't the officers have to take accountability just like we do as a human being? Where's the accountability if they supposedly mistakenly, accidentally shoot them in the back? Where's the accountability for that?
So, the best answer I can give you is that, without talking about any specific case, is there are accountability procedures. We've got oversight procedures. We've got accountability procedures such as body cameras that we're bringing and moving us into what I think is a current century policing. And we've got investigative accountability procedures, which I think is what we're referencing here. Currently, the Attorney General, State Attorney General, or the FBI can come in and look at any of my cases, and each and every time I've said I am open to that. I have no problem with State Attorney General or Federal Bureau of Investigations coming in and looking at our cases. I would never resist that. Within this county, we also have what's known as the countywide protocol, which, as I mentioned, is led by the district attorney, but has multiple investigative branches within that, and that's the current procedure within our county as well. So that is the current accountability procedure here.
name's Tiffany Camden. My brother was shot and killed on January 6, 2015. The thing that really hit me is what Mr. Bivens said. The officers want to go home alive, but that doesn't mean someone has to die. All lives matter, whether you're black, white, blue, sir, everyone matters. So I feel the lack of training and the lack of understanding of special needs, drug abuse, alcoholism, there needs to be more training. And I feel the actions that were taken that night should have gone differently, as well as my brother should be in jail right now, and I should be slapping him, telling him, what the heck were you thinking? But I can't. So I thank the good officers for doing their job, and I thank everyone who's got that fight in them to make sure things change, because we need a good change. We can't do this negativity anymore. No more F the police, no more hating them. We gotta make everything right and do it right. A positive change. Let's do it the right way, community and police.
Good evening. I have a two-part question, and one, there's been a lot of talk about community and working together as a community and being a part of the community. What percentage of the police force live in Stockton? How many of our officers are actually here? They don't go somewhere else. And is there an incentive for police officers to live in Stockton? The second part of my question is that I understand that the U.S. military offloads equipment to police. I find that shocking, but it's happening. So with the increased militarization of our police forces, do you believe that that leads to increased misuse of that material and that power? And as the last person just spoke, we need some serious training on deep levels for our officers. I know young men and women who say they want to go into the police force, and I cringe, but I support them because the idea of the police is to help support and keep a calm community. And so those are my two questions.
So to begin, about half, a little less than half of our staff live within the city. I will say that makes them in my opinion, that makes them no less committed to the community that they serve. And I'll also say that that's not abnormal for any place. We survey other agencies, other jurisdictions as well. I live in this community because that's my passion. Now, I guess the second one was militarization, or that term, and the reason I don't use the term is tactical equipment made available to law enforcement? Yes. Are we using them, or are we going to use them for a military style purpose? No. We wear our public servant hat. However, there are circumstances where tactical equipment does need to be used, and if it's in how you use the equipment. What are you using it for? Are you just rolling around the streets in military mode with the armored vehicle and things like that? Then that's a problem. We don't do that. It's specifically used for a certain purpose, and we have not obtained an armored vehicle through the 1033 or military surplus program. We did get a law enforcement purpose armored vehicle, but not through the military. And that's what we did here, at least our community.
Yeah, me and a couple of the other people out here in the community have been out there speaking to people, and we've been hearing a lot of complaints about Officer David Wells taking IDs from people, and then they end up getting arrested by officers later. We've also been having a lot of complaints about Officer Houston Sensabaugh. Aside from the 3 killings he was involved in, he's also put his dog on this lady's son, who's obviously mentally disabled. And on top of that, he arrested and handcuffed this disabled man behind me. So when you have officers like that going around doing these things, and we file complaints with your internal affairs division, and then they call the kid a crybaby because he's had more than one issue with one officer, and he knows now that your internal affairs, they're not helping him either. Who do we expect to help us? And then on top of that, can you name of any officers that you've actually disciplined when people went to these internal affairs reviews? Because we've submitted quite a few complaints, and the officers' behaviors haven't changed, and it's actually showed videos and quite a few other incidents with these officers, especially with sense about being a liability. Will you be putting cameras on these troubled officers and the ones that have been involved in murders and killings in our communities? Because the people that just spoke, the officer that killed their loved one, he's killed before. And Houston Sensabaugh was killed 3 times. So when you put these cameras on these officers, will you be putting them on our troubled officers, the ones that seem to be a little trigger happy and quick to shoot? Because those are the ones that are a big danger to us out here. And since you haven't fired them, and the last district attorney justified all the murders, we as a community would like to know, do you plan on, securing us and protecting us with these cameras by putting them on your officers that have killed, especially more than once? Because we know that we don't want to lose any more loved ones to your officers.
Couple questions to answer. First off, the internal affairs process can be reviewed by the state. Do we hold officers accountable? Yes. Because of state law and because of Peace Officer Bill of Rights, we do not divulge specific information. The complainant in an internal affairs investigation does get notification of the result of the complaint, but all other personnel matters, especially names and specific information, is actually forbidden by law, especially with the state law, state code, government code, and penal code. There are restrictions on the release of that information.
So will you be putting cameras on the troubled officers?
That was the second part of the question. The cameras are for all field personnel. So the goal is all officers in patrol and in the field will ultimately, when we're done rolling out the program, will have cameras.
Thank you for this evening. Again, if you did not have an opportunity to ask a question or make a comment, please fill out the comment cards. Also, if you think this type of forum is good for the community and police relations, please make that suggestion. The CAB board, as well as the police department, NAACP, and El Concilio are welcome to hear your comments or suggestions. And again, thank you so much for this evening, certainly for your cooperation and the courtesy and the respect you gave to all of us. And now I'd like to turn it over to Pastor Dunham for closing remarks.
All right, good evening to everyone that has stayed around. Yes, our community is in bad fix. Yes, we don't trust each other in this community. Yes, we have a problem. But my solution has always been to always look to the Lord for my answers. I've dreamed and I've had visions of having something like this right here in the heart of Stockton, California. And the Lord blessed us to be able to come in this type of atmosphere to where we can sit down and question the chief, and question others. Because I think it's important that we have community relationship. You would ask me why I believe that we're going through what we're going through. I believe we've walked away from God. And until we get back to God, we're going to always have problems. I believe that. I really believe that. So I'm praying and asking God to bless our city continuously. praying and ask God to bless our police staff. I'm praying and ask God to bless our children. You know, because the truth of the matter is, a lot of times, it's not just the community fault, it's not just the police fault. It's a lot of our parents that have problems too. The Bible says, train up a child in the way they should go. And they won't go far from that. Okay, so we want to make sure that we do all we can to make sure we keep God in front of our community. We need Him. We need God in our situation. We can't do this by ourselves. So would you be so kind with me and just bow your heads with me as we leave from this place. Father, we thank you for allowing us this type of meeting. Thank you, Lord, for those that was able to come and ask questions, had their concerns. Thank you, Lord, for the answers in which they came up with on this night. Now, Lord, we need your blessing. You told us if we call on you, you would answer. So please have your way. Our community needs you right now. Lord, whether it be from the police or our children, we need you to come in and sup with us. Show us the right way to deal with our situation. And we'll always be grateful just to say thank you. Now give us traveling grace to our homes, that they be found just the way we left them, safe and sound. In Jesus' name, thank you tonight. Amen. Come on, let's put our hands together as we get ready to leave from this place. God bless you. Go in peace. Go in peace.